Hello everybody. Today we're going to be covering off one of the ways which I recommend new users start out with testing and running with Linux. So this is really aimed at the users who are in Windows. They've got a reasonable machine, and by a reasonable machine I mean a computer which is made within the last sort of 3, maybe 4 years with a decent amount of RAM. Now you're going to need a decent amount of RAM because the way we're doing this install today is through a program called VirtualBox installed within the Windows environment, so we're not actually dual booting or doing anything particularly fancy or special, but it is a way to allow you to run Linux, learn how the operating system itself works, learn how the different desktop environments work, and try and get a handle on Linux before making a decision on whether you want to run it as a daily driver, in which case you'll need to install it either as a dual boot or even as a full operating system install and replacing Windows. For that you'll need to talk to or look to one of my future videos. Or whether you decide, no, you know what, this Linux thing isn't for me, I'm now going to move on to another operating system and see if that fits my needs more than Windows does. And that could be FreeBSD, OpenBSD, some other operating system. There's React OS out there. There's a few if you do some searching. So today I'm aiming this particular video at the new users to Linux, the people who maybe have been using Windows for a long time. It's aimed directly at the Windows 10 people because that's what I'm currently running here is Windows 10. But it's transferable across the board because VirtualBox is a open source piece of software that operates on most versions of Windows. I believe Windows 7 has just run out of support, but it does still run on Windows 7 as far as I'm aware. So what we're going to cover off first of all is how to get VirtualBox, how to configure VirtualBox to run a virtual instance, setting it up so that it will automatically boot up and run the install, and then we'll run through the installer and have a quick look at Ubuntu inside a virtual environment on this particular system. Now there is going to be a follow-up video where we create a boot disk and actually install another version of Ubuntu which is aimed at lower spec hardware. So this would be more for the users who don't have powerful enough hardware to run a VirtualBox. Someone who maybe has got $50 or $100 lying around and has picked up a second-hand laptop that someone's throwing out cheap, but they're finding it's running slow on Windows. That's a perfect sort of candidate for the follow-up video, which is going to be focused on Ubuntu, which is a version of Ubuntu that runs LXQT, I believe. And it's designed around older hardware. It has much lower running specs than what Ubuntu does, and Ubuntu's specs aren't that particularly high anyway. But it is aimed more for the users that don't have the memory to be able to run a virtual machine. So first of all, let's have a quick look at what those specs are that we need. So this is the VirtualBox webpage. We're not too worried about this just yet. We're actually looking at the Ubuntu minimum system requirements. That would be this little section right here. 2 GHz dual core processor. Most computers created in the last sort of 10 years would meet that. 4 gigs of RAM system memory. Now this is actually if you're doing a physical installation that they require that. For a virtual installation it says a little bit further down that it's actually only 2 gig of RAM, which you need for a virtualized install. Approximately 25 gig of hard drive space, so we need to create the virtual machine with at least 25 gigs of space according to this. Honestly, pretty much any machine in the last sort of 10 years is going to meet this at least, even your laptops. So I wouldn't worry too much about this. The only caveat to that is if you're running a very, very bleeding edge version of an NVIDIA card, such as a 2080 Ti, or some of the very, very, very new cards which are being released sort of now or in the last sort of few months. They may not have driver support in some versions of Linux, including Ubuntu. That's a topic for another video. I'm not covering that today, but just know that if you are running NVIDIA video cards, particularly the very, very new ones, you may have an issue with Ubuntu, and you'll need to do a little bit of research until I can release a later video addressing how you can work around that. Now it says a CD, DVD drive or USB port. Obviously today that's not really required for us. We're running it as an ISO, which is a virtualized CD port. Later on in the next video that I release, it's going to cover off USB installation. It says internet access is helpful. This is because you can actually use it to download further packages down the track. That's a little bit outside the scope of this video. I will show you how to get some packages. It's through a package manager that Ubuntu has called APT, but we're not going to be focusing on that. So yes, it's needed, but it's not the basis of this video. The basis of this video is getting VirtualBox installed, getting Ubuntu installed, getting you to have a look at the actual desktop environment, and then we can start having a look at a couple of the little bits and pieces. I will just quickly touch on the Ubuntu version, which is going to be the next video, only because it is very, very lightweight. It only requires about 1 gig of memory, according to this. It's actually, this is a little bit out of date because they're talking about Ubuntu 18.04, and Ubuntu is now up to 20.04. But the point stands in that it is designed around being a very lightweight install, which is why I said if you can pick up a cheap laptop, it doesn't matter if it's really on its last legs in terms of Windows, because Windows does run slower on those things. You can install this, and I think you'll find that you may actually pick up a performance increase by installing a very lightweight version of Linux, only because it is so lightweight, which means it's actually got more memory free for other things, whereas Windows tends to use a fair amount of memory. And we can have a really quick look at that. This is just so that you can see what I'm talking about in terms of memory. Now, I'm not really doing anything. I've got a web page open in Chrome. I've got OBS running to record this video, and you can see I'm using approximately 6 gig of the 32 gig RAM that's in this system. To put it in perspective, doing the same thing under my Linux install on this same machine, I would be looking at around about 3 to 4 gig. So it's a little bit heavier, and that 2 gig is, it's not in all the operating system, it's other services that the operating system runs. But at the end of the day, it is a slightly bigger footprint in the operating system, which is why I say you may pick up a little bit of performance increase running something like Ubuntu on an older laptop. So moving away from this, what software do we require? Well, for today's video, we only need VirtualBox and Ubuntu, or Ubuntu, or any other flavor of Linux. The flavor doesn't really matter on this. The guide is going to be more or less the same. They all come, or almost all of them come with a live installer, and we'll see how that all works in a few minutes. So VirtualBox, I've just come to the download VirtualBox link. I'm running on a Windows machine, as I expect most of my audience today would be. Some people may be running on OS X under Mac or under BSD or a Solaris host. Some may even be running under Linux. Now, this has got a link to download and install under Linux. If you are a Linux user and you are watching this video, I strongly urge you to check your package managers, because under Arch and under Manjaro and everything under Arch, I can definitely say VirtualBox is inside the package manager, and I expect that that's going to be the case for most flavors of Linux. I would much prefer personally to use the flavor that comes from VirtualBox that comes with my particular package manager over downloading off of a website, only because we know, and those of you who use Linux will know what I'm talking about when I say this, we know that what's in the repositories of Linux has been checked, whereas the stuff which is in the AUR for Arch or just off of the free net may or may not contain something which we don't necessarily want or don't necessarily know about. So basically all I did there was I clicked the Windows hosts and downloaded the, sorry, I just tapped the mic, and downloaded the executable. So here we are. Now this Rufus, that'll become handy for the next video. That's how you actually burn a USB image. You can see I've got the two ISOs here, Ubuntu and Lubuntu, both 20.4, so both the most recent versions. And I've also got VirtualBox. So I'm just going to run VirtualBox. Being Windows, I think we can just open it, but I'm going to run it as an administrator just in case there's anything that pops up in terms of maybe it needs access to a restricted part of the hardware or something silly like that. Most of the time I wouldn't expect it, but it's better just to do it once. And I never use Windows really these days. I'm more of a Linux user these days. So we just run through the installation, just click next. All the defaults are fine for these. It's telling me that it's going to install some networking features, which is going to temporarily destroy my network connection. So basically it'll disconnect me from the network, create a virtualized network adapter so that VirtualBox can use it, and then it'll restore my network connection. It'll probably go down for maybe a minute, 2 minutes. It sounds a lot more traumatic than what it actually is. So I'm just going through and installing it now. Would I like to install it? Yes, I want to install it. That's because I ran it as admin. Yes, I want to start it after installation. Thank you very much. And here we have it, VirtualBox. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a machine. So this is essentially just a machine so that we can say, hey, we're going to create a virtual machine now. Part of this process will allow us to create a virtual hard drive to add on to the machine. Then we'll install the ISO. We'll tweak a couple of settings before we start it up, and then we'll get in and do the install. So I'm just going to call this Ubuntu, just because I'm not really very good at naming conventions. I am just going to pick a location on here. Let's just call it, no, not a shortcut, VHDs, select folder. So we're going to call it Ubuntu, type Linux. It's automatically detected just from what I typed that I'm going to be using Ubuntu, which is great. I'm just going to, this is just curiosity now. Yeah, if I did Lubuntu it would do the same thing, and that's really good because they're both actually an Ubuntu central core. So we go next. How much RAM do I want? Now we know that we need at least 2 gig. I'm going to give it a bit more, only because I've got more to spare, and this way I don't have to worry about swap files. If you are limited though, actually what I'll do, I'll give it 2 gig. I'll just stick to what it says. So 1024, that would be 2048. No one in that. So this is the minimum it's suggesting for a virtualized machine. It's probably not going to look great. I may need to increase it later, but I'll do that on camera so you can see it. Yes, I want to create a virtual hard drive. Thank you very much. That's going to go in the same location. I'm going to make it as a VDI. You can use VHDs. If you create a VHD, I'm not 100% sure. I've not tried it, but if you create a VHD, I believe you can transport it from VirtualBox into Microsoft's Hyper-V. I don't know if there's any conflicts with that, but I'm of the opinion that it will probably work because VHD is a file type, and that's the file type that Microsoft uses, so I think it would work. And if you know, please throw something in the comments and let me know if I'm wrong, because that would be a really good learning point for me. I'm going to have dynamically allocated. So in this case, actually, no, let's do it this way. I'm going to set it up to be 25 gig, because that's what we were told we needed. You can see it's gone into the same location, which is great. It's just creating it. It's going to take a few seconds. Just while it's doing this, for those that are running on Linux, some of the options that you set under Linux is going to be a little bit different to what we set here for Windows. And that's just purely because of the way that VirtualBox under Linux operates. I will cover that off in a later video. Most of the settings are identical, but there is a couple of things that Linux does differently, particularly with relation to display adapters, that can be a little bit funny with some virtual machines if you don't set them correctly. And here we have it. We've got our little virtual machine just sitting there powered off at the moment, which is what we want. First thing we're going to set is storage, so I'm just going to double click on storage. I'm going to give it a live CD and I'm going to pick an image. So choose a disk file, which I'm just going to quickly come into downloads. Ubuntu for this one. Display. Now I've got a 1080 Ti in here with lots of memory, so I'm just going to bump that up a little bit. I've only got one monitor, and I'm not going to enable 3D acceleration. I could. Under Windows it does work okay. Under Linux, the only time I would ever use 3D acceleration is if you've got a dedicated video card for the virtual machine. Under Windows it can work, but it's better not to. I typically, for this, will change it to VBox VGA and just use the VirtualBox VGA controller. Most of the time VMS VGA works fine, but occasionally it does have issues. It says invalid invalid settings detected, and this is just because it's expecting to use VMS VGA. I'm going to use that for this one. I don't expect any issues, but if there are issues, this is what we would change first, just to make sure that we remove the obvious. Okay, so general settings. Yes, it's Ubuntu. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. We don't want disk encryption. You can enable it if you wish, but for a virtual machine, I don't really care. It's a Windows virtual machine that I'm not going to use after this demonstration, so I'm not particularly worried. For you, your mileage may vary. You may want it, you may not, depending on what your use case is. When installing Linux, I find it's better not to have it, but again, it's up to the user. We don't need floppy. Base memory, we've got 2 gig. I'm going to give it at least 2 CPUs, because we know that that's what it requires from the system requirements up here. It says dual core processor, so we need to enable at least 2 cores for it to work optimally. I'm giving it 4. I've got plenty to spare, so that's not really an issue. These options, you can choose them or not. I tend not to, because I really don't need to. And also I don't really know or understand exactly what they do, so I tend to leave disabled things that I don't understand until I understand them better. Nested paging, yeah, that's just how the RAM's utilized. We probably don't need it, but I'm just going to leave it at default. Display, now this is what we were looking at before. I just want to make sure that that's alright. 100%, we may need to up that scale factor a little bit, but for now we'll leave it at 100%. Storage we've looked at, audio we've looked at, we're just going to leave those. I'm going to disable audio, only because I don't want it to steal the microphone or the sound while I'm talking to you. Network, yes, we want network. I leave this as default. I have never had to change this unless I wanted to add more than one network adapter, but generally for something like this, that's far too complicated. I just use single network adapter, leave the defaults, don't even change anything. Serial port's not needed. USB, if you wanted to forward through a USB, if you were trying to run it off of a boot installer, for example, you can do that here. You would just click on the little USB with the plus sign and you would find the USB that you want. You would then need to come back up into, I think it's general, is it general? One of these, I saw it a moment ago. Yeah, here it is, boot order. The boot order would have the USB in there now, and you just move that up so that it's one of the boot drives if you wanted to do that. Outside the scope of today, we're not doing that. And that's all we really need. These are just to deal with how the virtual machine uses, so I tend to turn that one off just so that it's out of the way, and I leave everything else on. You can leave that on, it's personal choice. I just turn it off while I'm recording because it gets in the way while I'm recording sometimes. Then we click OK. We're now ready to power it on. So we just go start, normal start. And what we should see happen is it'll just open up a little screen saying, hey, we've got this ISO. Do you want to start up with it? Yes, we do. Just gonna, and going full size with the screen didn't help. Go away, Power Toys. And yes, we don't need those. Okay, so it's just doing its normal checks just to make sure everything's okay, that it can actually run. Apparently no errors were found, which is always a good start. Okay, so this screen, it's saying, do you want to try or do you want to install? Now, if you're not sure, if you're just trying Ubuntu because you want to see what Ubuntu looks like, see what it feels like, you don't really want to install it, particularly if you're installing it from a USB onto a machine and you don't yet want to blow away the operating system, you just want to get a feel for how it all works, you can click Try Ubuntu. And what that will do is it'll load up Ubuntu as what's called a live image, whereby it actually loads the operating system and everything it needs to run into memory, and it will operate from memory, and you can use it, you can see what Linux is about, see what Ubuntu is about, see if you like the look and feel of it, see if you like the desktop environment, see what you don't like about it. We're not doing that today, we're going to actually do an install, but it's really important that you understand that you can do that, and it does have this option, this live CD option, with most distributions, certainly most of the Debian based distributions such as Ubuntu, Linux Mint, but most distributions have this option. And it also gives you a really good chance to try out different desktop environments without having to commit to them as a daily driver. But today we're just going to install. It's already detected my language is English, so I'm just going to leave that alone. My keyboard layout is actually a US keyboard despite being in Australia, and I'm going to use US English because I can't be bothered trying to figure out whether there's anything interesting about my keyboard. So I can do a quick test. This is a quick test of the keyboard, and it all looks fine. If I do the inverted commas, that works. If I do the tilde or the grave, yep, they work. @'s in the right place. So this is the right keyboard for me. Some people, these are the keyboards the keys that will typically give it away for me. Usually the settings that I get are either English US or English UK layouts. They're the two layouts that seem to be very, very common. And the @ key and the inverted commas are the one that give that away. Just a little tip for those that don't know. What do you want to install? Yeah, let's go with normal. We can do a minimal installation, which will give us a web browser and very, very, very basic utilities, but I'm not interested in that for the purposes of this video. I want to actually show you what it looks like if you do a proper install. Do we want to download updates? Yeah, why not? Do we want to install third-party graphics? Now this is really important if you're running an NVIDIA card. In a VirtualBox, not so much. So for us, we're not going to be ticking this box. But if you were running an NVIDIA card and you were running this on a hardware install, as in you were installing on the laptop or as a boot, you would want to check this for the latest NVIDIA drivers. If you're on the very, very latest video cards, this is the option I was talking about where you might have some issues. So if you are running the latest, I would say don't install this and then try and install it later. So we'll just continue. And it should be going off and checking the internet to see if there's any updates at this point. Okay, so it's tried to detect operating systems. So this is somewhat good news for Windows users that are installing on their hard drives rather than on a virtual infrastructure as we are today. It will try and find other operating systems. I say somewhat good news because I've had really, really mixed reports on this. I myself have never had an issue, but I have heard from and read about many, many users that have found that it's destroyed their Windows partition or it's destroyed their Windows installation. Other users have reported that it keeps the Windows installation just fine because they're trying to dual boot, but then they've got other Linux installations that it's destroyed as part of that. So it seems to be a little bit hit and miss. I would suggest if you're dual booting, i.e. looking to run Linux and Windows side by side, that you'll probably be okay, because that's the use case I've only ever used it with and I've never had a problem. Just make sure that you do install the Linux on a different hard drive to what you've got your Windows installed on. That way, if anything does go pear-shaped, you know that you can at least get one of them up and running to do the troubleshooting on your bootloader. So yeah, we're just going to erase and install because we've got nothing here. It's just a virtual box with nothing on it. We created the virtual hard drive as you saw. It's just saying this is what we're going to do. So on our first hard drive, which is marked as SCSI 3, we're going to create a partition as ext4. Not too sure why. Okay, so this first one is going to be our boot partition. So this is where I assume it's grub. It could be Lilo, it could be a couple of other things, but I think it's probably grub is going to live. So that's our bootloader, which I was just talking about. And then this will be our main partition where most of the data, the operating system itself, is going to live. So we'll just click continue to that. It does it all itself. There's no manual configuration for us. Now we should find once it actually starts installing, it should only take, and yes, I'm in Sydney, thank you. And now it's asking who I am. Well, I'm not going to give you my real details. I think I'm going to use my name. I'll just put that. That'll do. And my super secure password. And there we go. So now we just need to restart. Now I'm not going to restart because we also want to remove the ISO so that it actually boots for us. And yeah, see, it's brought us into the boot disk, which we didn't really want. So I'm just going to power it off for a moment. Power it off now. Okay, so now it's telling us to remove the installation media, which we're now doing. Remove disk. reset the machine. Yes, yes. Okay, so I guess I'm just going to pick me, enter my super security conscious password, and connect to my online accounts. Well, I'm not going to do that. I don't want to do that. If you've got a Microsoft account though, you can use it. I'm just going to skip though. Live patch. Canonical live patch helps keep your computer security. Keep your computer secure by applying some updates that would normally require restarting. Look, for me, this is a VM that I'm not going to be keeping long term, so I'm not going to bother, but I do recommend that you do it. Yep, that's my password again. Need to use an Ubuntu 1 account. See, I don't have an Ubuntu 1 account, so I'm not going to do this anyway. But if you are looking to use it long term, I do suggest you do this, if only so that you can get the latest security updates. So I'm just going to skip it. No, don't send my system info. Privacy. Do I want location services? For me, no, but you can if you want. So, good, we're ready to go, and there's also a software updater. Lovely. So, here is a sample of some of the apps that you can get. So I'm going to use probably GIMP, GNU Image Manipulation Program, to show you how the package manager works. Updated software has been released. Do you want to install it now? I'm going to say remind me later. I don't really feel like getting everything up to date. Let's first of all check our display settings, because this is not feeling like a very decently sized screen. Let's move it. Is there a 1080? Okay, take two. So in the last video, or the last video attempt, I found out that when I did the selection of the desktop screen, that it actually was larger than what I had set to record in OBS, which means you guys couldn't see everything that I could. And it also made a less than enjoyable viewing experience. So I'm now going to try and correct the majority of that. So we'll have a quick look once again at the package manager, package management of Ubuntu, as well as a quick look at the GNOME terminal. I fully expect that there'll be some editing and a couple of chops. Unfortunately, it's unavoidable because of the issue that I identified. So I'm just going to log in with my nice and secure, super secure password. I have already readjusted the display so that it's a little bit nicer, as well as confirmed that you guys can actually see it. So first thing, software updates, or rather Ubuntu software. So if we're looking for something, you've got this particular application that you can use to install applications that you might be interested in on an as-needed basis. I would have really liked to see, oh look, there is a search function. Okay, so if I do a search on, I don't know, let's look for IRC. It should bring up all the IRC chat clients, I imagine. Taking a little bit of time. How about we try something a little simpler? No application. No application. So is it a case of the search is there but not working? Or is it something else? Maybe Command T? Nope. So it's just slow. Chromium. So we can install Chromium, for example. Insert the admin password to allow it to actually install. We can do things that way. Another way that we can do things, which is actually my personally preferred method, is we can use the terminal. I do prefer the terminal personally. So we can do a sudo, actually we don't need super user to do a search, so apt search. I wonder if it's got neofetch. Yeah, it does have neofetch, okay. So if I do sudo apt install neofetch, password, yep. Now you're probably wondering what neofetch does. It's just a little terminal tool that Rices will use. I don't mind it because it gives a little bit of system information, a nice little bit of ASCII art. It's just a little fun thing. It shouldn't take very long to install. And there it is. So if I clear the window and just run it, that's what it does. So a little bit of ASCII art, a whole bunch of information about the system. Another way that I could have told whether it was GNOME or KDE is just through doing this. Windows Manager Mutter. Haven't heard of that one before, but okay. So that's two ways of installing software. You've got the software tool for the GUI. Those new to Windows, you'll be able to use it much like the Windows shop, except without the need for a wallet, as everything in there, well, as far as I know, everything in there is free. I don't use Ubuntu very much, so I can't say with certainty, but certainly under most package managers, in the GUI version of their package managers, they do provide predominantly free software. There's the occasional one which might be non-open source and proprietary, in which case you might have to pay a little bit of money for that, but by and large that's not the case. Or you can use the command line. As I already did, you can do a search, you can do an install. You can also do a removal. So if I want to uninstall something, what does it remove? Not sure if that removes. Yeah, auto remove removes all unused packages. So if I want to remove GIMP, say apt remove GIMP. Yep. And as simple as that. GIMP is no longer there. Sudo apt remove. Let's try and remove Chromium. Package Chromium is not installed, so not removed. Yeah, I should have really seen that coming. But if I wanted to remove neofetch, I can do that too, and it's the same thing. So you can install, you can uninstall from the command line very, very quickly, very easily. The one thing about the command line though is that it requires you to know what you're looking for, or at least know what it is you want to install. So if you don't know what you're looking for, that's where you'll do your searches. If you don't know what application you're even looking for, so you don't know to even search for something like, say, I wonder if HTOP's installed actually. No, it's not. Okay, so sudo install htop. So that's one way of searching, is you just, I happened along that because I know what htop is, and I use it to monitor my processes. It's very much like the process monitor, but in terminal. And this gives me my 4 cores, how much memory I'm using, 850 meg out of 2 gig, what my swap file is. Do I really need a swap file? Probably not, but it is what it is. Q to quit. So you can search for it that way. The other way that you can search for applications is if you know what your Windows application is. Alternative 2 is what it was. You can use this website, alternative2.net, and you can actually come in here and you can look for your Windows software. So I think a pretty common one is going to be Office 365. I think a lot of people are going to want, if they're moving to Linux, to find the alternative to that if they don't want to use the web version. And you can come in here and you can see what they are. If you want to restrict by platform, we can do that. Let's restrict to open source licensing. And can we restrict to Linux? Now we can see all the software that's on Linux that operates in that Office 365 sort of space. And these are primarily online, so that was probably a poor example. How about we do Microsoft Office instead? Let's go with Outlook. Did I click on something again? Yeah, I did. So again, platform, we want Linux. And license, we generally either want open source or free, but I would go with open source. Because with open source, you have the ability to look at and change the source code, which means it's pretty rare for anything malicious to get through. Thunderbird, which is what we've actually got installed already. Evolution. Clause. Geary. Mutt. Mutt's good if you're a terminal sort of guy, or girl. It allows you to just read your text in your terminal window, so you don't have that jarring, gooey thing in your face. I'm not fully terminal based yet, but I'm getting there. I've heard good things about this one, but I don't know much about it. I've never actually used any of these. I generally just use webmail. But the point is, you can come to this website, do a search for whatever it is that you're using in Windows, and you can find the application to look for. So let's use Mutt as the example. So if I want to see if it's in our store, I do a search on Mutt. It's giving me a list of things. So Mutt profile, Mutt print, it's probably there. Mutter, Mutt down, Mutt VC, vcard query from, yeah, here it is. Mutt focal updates, focal security. So we can install Mutt, and it's the same command, apt install Mutt. Do I want to continue? It'll take up, what, 5 meg? Yeah, sure. I'm not worried about 5 meg. It won't take long to download. If I want to run it, I just run Mutt. Now saying, doesn't exist. Of course it doesn't exist because I haven't set it up yet. I'm going to go no. It was more just a way to see what it looks like. The other thing that I'm interested to find out is if it actually shows, being that it's a terminal app, having installed it that way, does it appear? Yes, it does, in our little app list in the bottom corner. So that's good. So yeah, guys, that's a quick look around how to install software. A quick look at the GNOME layout. Now, for those that are coming from Windows, be aware that just because this is your first look at what Linux is, Linux does not have a defined look. This particular brand of Linux appears to only have a single virtual desktop. It's got things set the way that it's set here, but there are many, many, many more ways of setting up a Linux view, even within just GNOME. So if I do a search on GNOME Desktop Rice and images, we should get some funky, like this one. So this is someone who's obviously spent a little bit of time setting up some terminals and things like this, but it's within GNOME. So you can see that it's got a very similar toolbar on the left. He's got several terminal apps running, including Cowsay from the looks of it. And he spent some time setting it up so that it was a blue-green. And you can actually see that he's even in Ubuntu. Version 16.04. So there's lots and lots and lots of things that you can do even within this. If you're looking for more desktops, you can look for them. If you're looking for a different feel, you don't have to use GNOME. You can use any of the others, including, and I'm just going to put these out here. If I do a quick desktop environment, Linux. So, what's that? That looks like GNOME. And I can't really tell what the others are. But if I instead go to an all search rather than an image search, we can see just how many desktop environments there are. There are heaps of them. So GNOME, XFCE, Cinnamon, Mate, LXDE, KDE, LXQT, Budgie. They're probably the more well-known. Enlightenment is starting to become a little less well-known as we're starting to move down now. KDE's obviously already been spoken about. That's a very old version from the looks of it. What else have we got? I'm just looking to see if there's anything. Yeah, we're sort of getting away now. So you've sort of got 10 or 12 different desktop environments that you can choose from, and there is a lot of variation in even how they look and how they behave. So if I just open up this KDE Plasma image, but for right now, if you like the video, smash the like button. If you want to see more videos, subscribe. If you've got comments, please leave them below. Very new to this, so learning, and the more feedback, the better. Thanks, guys.